Hi everyone, it's Cynthia with Healing Holden again. I am just getting updated, or am I saying I'm just updating you now on the mold issue that we had. This is an article from one of my favorite magazines I like to talk to y'all about, the What Doctors Don't Tell You. This one's about reversing tooth decay, but inside, as I was moving to my new place to get out of the mold that was causing Holden's Tourette's and causing me pain and brain fog and memory loss, I happened to open up one of these magazines and lo and behold, here it is. So I'm going to take some of the pieces that I learned from this, and I've been doing a little research on mold to share with you. Apparently, and well, I'll read it to you here. We got a lot of updates, actually. I'm very excited to tell you that, let me tell you what I was going to tell you with this video in the first place. I was going to update you on how he did since he was going to be with me for 10 days over the Christmas holidays, and out of his dad's house and out of that house, out of school, which is an old school. It's, you know, and one of those old, you know, historical type of buildings, and you know there's mold in those, especially if you're in Houston, Texas. So I'm here in my jammies. It's almost 2021, so if you hear anything in the background in a few minutes, it's just people celebrating. Hopefully. Anyway, so he was here for 10 days, and what I noticed was that he did chill out. He was really agitated and started a lot of OCD with his cat that I got as a support animal, and he just seemed to calm down. The first few days, not so much, and we actually started using a product that Dr. Osborne sells, and it's sold online, called anxiety control. And it's, you know, just because he was having so much anxiety over his cat, like wanting his cat to do the same thing that the cat that I have here, which is his sister, do. So if one cat was sleeping, the other one had to be sleeping. So, you know, that kind of OCD anxiety, and he'd freak out, he'd cry. He would be like, you know, leaping to conclusions like, does that mean he's introverted if he's tired? Because we've been talking about personality types and introverts and extroverts. And I tested him on MBTI, and now all of a sudden he wants to know everybody's type, which sometimes, and I'm raising my hand here, that's what happens when somebody gets into this. Anyway, so he would kind of flip out. Like one thing would mean something totally unrelated, like the cat is resting and his sister is not. So it must be because he's an introvert, or maybe he's not like everyone else. Is he autistic? And, you know, so anyway, just a lot of calming him down. So he took this anxiety control stuff, and you can look it up on the internet. It's like GABA and some different vitamins, and then also passion flower, which passion flower is a known calmative. So he did better when he had that, and when he saw himself getting into it, I'm like, okay, let's give you some anxiety control. But after about 3 days, he started doing much better, and we didn't need to give him the anxiety control anymore. And here and there, he would kind of maybe do that again, but he'd control it. He'd be like, okay, I'm doing it again. I'm doing it. I won't do it anymore. I won't do it anymore. And he was fighting it. But at least he could fight it. Like before, he couldn't even fight it. It was like, forget about it. So he was doing really well here until we went ice skating, I think Christmas Day, and he picked up a bug, I think, from the skating rink. We both had, like, and I guess I did too, either from him or from the rink. But it was like a 24-hour stomach bug, and then he started twitching again and having like this thing, which is, you know, giving him more NAC will help with that. There we go. Is it midnight already? Anyway, so almost midnight. So I wanted to read you some of the stuff on this because one of the interesting things that I found in my research on different people's experiences is this one functional medicine doctor talked about how if you have the genes HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8, if you're positive on those, then you typically, that's a gluten intolerance one that Holden does have one copy. You know, there's one from the father, one from the mother. He has one copy of both of those. So he's moderately gluten intolerant. If he were to have 2, he would probably be on track for celiac disease. Anyway, so what that lady was saying is that can make you more susceptible to mold. So like typically in a mold infested house, you will have some people that are reactive to the mold toxins and some people aren't. Just like if you have an allergy, some people have an allergy to nuts and some don't. They could be in the same family, same household. So some people might have an allergy to mold and others might have a sensitivity to the toxins. And people with HLA-DQ 2 and 8 have hypersensitivity to the toxins. So that might have been why he was reacting to the mold much more strongly than I was. Even though I was reacting, it wasn't Tourette's and all the craziness that we've been experiencing lately. So anyway, I just wanted to read a little bit. I've highlighted kind of the most interesting things that you may not already know about this, and that I didn't already say in my original mold and Tourette's video on Healing Holden. If you haven't seen that and want to go look at that, it's part of the Healing Holden channel. Anyway, this says approximately 25% of the world's population is thought to be genetically susceptible, the HLA-DQ genes that I'm talking about, to mold-related illness, which is why only 1 or 2 people living in a mold-infested home might show any symptom. I've had some patients, this is a doctor talking, who've had negative test genetic, okay, so the doctor that's talking here actually says this though. I've had some patients who have had negative genetic markers, and yet when we've done an assessment of urine and mold toxicity, they are indeed positive. And when we start the mold treatment that is beneficial for someone suffering from mold exposure, their symptoms get better. So it could be, and I've long thought this, I think that the copy of the genes that Holden got for his gluten sensitivity come from his father, because they have a lot of, like his sister's borderline, he's bipolar, his aunt is this is my ex-husband, Holden's grand-aunt is a serial killer, so I'm thinking if they give up gluten, maybe they'd be fine. And, of course, if there's no mold in their house and stuff, this could solve a lot of the world's ills. Anyway, so a lot of our mold patients seem to be gluten intolerant, and I suspect the mold may trigger the gluten gene to become positive. I guess this is like epigenetics, where they say genetics is the gun, and I guess epigenetics loads the gun or pulls the trigger, something like that. Anyway, I can't say I have a degree in this stuff, guys. I'm just reading to you and trying to pontificate about what I think is going on with my son. And then based on his labs and the labs we did. And I'm not going to show you his HLA-DQ lab. I mean, I'm telling you, that's good enough. I don't need to prove that one. But there is a genetic marker. So if you're going to get gluten tests, get the genetic test. Dr. Osborne has them on his website. You can just order through the mail a little swab and then send it in to get your DNA checked. We had it done by another doctor. So what she says is it's not, and this is, says Dr. Jennifer Armstrong, an environmental physician at the Ottawa Environmental Health Clinic in Ontario, Canada. It's not just the mold that makes you toxic. It may trigger you to become chemically sensitive. Then you can't tolerate perfumes and other things, and eventually you end up totally disabled for the rest of your life. So that's really interesting, because I know a lot of people are chemically sensitive. And this is saying that could possibly be the reason you're in a moldy house. So it makes sense, because it's basically, from everything that we've done so far with Holden, it's that his methylation pathways, the pathways, the highways in your body that get all the trash out, they're congested because he's had, we've lived in old houses all his life. So this is the first time I've actually had like a new place, and it's weird to me, but I'm hopeful that this is what he needed. So he had mold, he had, my ex's lead diesel car that he was riding in, he had gluten intolerance, but then you add on top of that the toxins, the real toxic soup well, first, and then we live in a world that's toxic. But then you add on top of that the vaccinations, which are just pumping you full. I mean, 25 vaccines by the time there's 3, pumping you full of all this garbage. And your pathways, you know, alumina, mercury, the diseases, and then the adjuvants and the incipients, that is just too much for a little body to take. And so this whole time, his highways to take out the trash have been congested. So the mold just adds more on top of it. And then the toxins from, you know, for people who are sensitive to chemicals, just add on top of that. So if you're sensitive to perfumes or different chemicals, you may want to consider getting a mold test in your house. See if maybe that's going on. Says one of the most striking and disturbing aspects of mold-related illness is the mental component. Nowadays, brain fog is a ubiquitous symptom linked to everything from high blood sugar to low blood sugar, chronic fatigue syndrome, and not drinking enough coffee in the morning. Yet one of the primary symptoms of exposure to molds is brain fog, mental confusion, and memory loss. And I'm telling you, man, I don't feel like myself. I'm sitting at work just trying to squeeze like I got a wet rag, and I'm trying to squeeze whatever I can out of my brain. Brain fog, along with most other mold-related neurological symptoms, is driven by mold toxins altering the body's immune system. Psychiatrist and neurologist Dr. Mary Beth Ackerley, who practices in Tucson, Arizona, poignantly refers to inflammation-based cognitive issues as a brain on fire. Clinical studies have linked indoor mold exposure to alterations in the brain's blood flow and electrical activity, along with dysregulation of emotions and problems in concentration, memory, and balance. Yes. And I also heard one lady was talking about how you may even have like static electricity. She explained it very well. I don't know exactly how it works, but apparently like she had one client who, and I've known someone like this before, where all the electronics deals with, like his cell phone, his watch, they all go kaput on him. And it turned out he had a mold illness, and it was causing changes in his electrical activity in his body. Crazy stuff. Pretty cool. And he had, had a lot of static, like when he touched people and stuff. So, according to Ackerley, T2 mycotoxin from Fusarium mold kills normal brain cells indiscriminately, while ochratoxin released by Aspergillus depletes the brain of dopamine, which is highly associated with mood disorders and movement disorders like Parkinson's disease. It also affects the hippocampus in the brain, which is involved with memory. Cornish cites a particularly dramatic case of mold-related mental illness involving a patient who had been diagnosed with early onset dementia. After Cornish diagnosed mold toxicity as the culprit, the woman discovered that the beach house she'd been living in for 3 years was ridden with toxic mold. In addition to dementia, she also had severe brain fog and joint pain. I had joint pain. When she sold that beach house and moved, she felt better. Today, she is back to being fully functional. Can you imagine getting dementia and then you're fully functional? Mold can even drive suicidal thoughts. I have patients who will walk into moldy places, and their first sign that something is wrong is that they start thinking about suicide, says Ackerley. And it's not psychological. There's a state, probably of inflammation, associated with thinking suicidal thoughts. Pretty interesting. Research has shown that persistent activation of microglia, the resident immune cells in the brain, is highly associated with neurodegeneration, such as happens with Alzheimer's. It's also associated with bipolar disorder. Several patients I've treated are bipolar, and as we're treating for mold illness, they're finding clarity of thought and a release from their symptoms that they haven't had otherwise. Research also shows, unfortunately, although parents can control a child's mold exposure in the home, they can't regulate their conditions at school. Several doctors interviewed related stories of teachers suffering from acute mold toxicity because of the classrooms they taught in. Cornish once treated a teacher who presented with diarrhea and unstable temperature. Every year, he'd go back to work after the summer break, and he said he felt like he was losing his mind because he was having such difficulty concentrating. After being treated, he changed rooms and started to feel better. Testing revealed that mold was present throughout his old classroom and the one next to it. So, I mean, even if you're working in a sick building, it may just be a situation, like in most cases, you know, I think in the house I was in, it might have been all through the house, but there was an animal that had crawled in under the bathtub and it was climbing into the wall. So it may have just been there, and that was where my bedroom was right behind. So you may just need to move out of a room while it gets treated, or, you know, in a sick building, go to a different room like this teacher did. It's impossible to cure a mold infection if you keep getting reinfected. Get your home tested if there's mold, see if it can be mitigated. If not, move out. The traditional Western approach of treating an infection with antibiotics does more harm than good in the case of mold. In fact, mold is a major natural source of antibiotics, which they produce as a defense mechanism. Antibiotics definitely aren't the answer because they are grown in the mold medium. Says Barnett, even powerful antifungals are powerless to get rid of the mycotoxins left in a person's body after the mold is gone. So basically, they've already excreted all their crap into you. So even when you get rid of the mold, the next step is detoxing your body from all that stuff. So Barnett, Armstrong, and Cornish all focus on healing the digestive tract and any mitochondrial dysfunction, hormone abnormalities, parasites, and intestinal bacterial overgrowth accompanying the mold infection. Then they use natural mycotoxin binders such as activated charcoal, coconut charcoal, modified citrus pectin, zeolite, and bentonite clays, gamma-rizole, which is ozonated oil, and carbonized bamboo to pull toxins from the body. I have that stuff called Enteros gel, which is, I'll show you. It's from Russia and it's just silicone. So we've been using that. Oh, I forgot. I still have it somewhere else. Anyway, and it's in Russian anyway, but it's called Entero, E-N-T-E-R-O, Enteros gel. So Entero, S-G-E-L, E-N-T-E-R-O-S-G-E-L. There you go. There's a whole word. Brain fog, I'm telling you. So there's glutathione and N-acetylcysteine, which is exactly what I used before when Holden's arm was shooting out and his face was scrunching up, and we've been using like tons of that, copious amounts of that. Are powerful antioxidants that can help remove mold toxins, and infrared saunas, still trying to do that, are also helpful to sweat them out. A paleo diet, which is what he does, is usually recommended, or at the very least, the elimination of processed foods, refined sugars, alcohol, gluten, and fermented foods from the diet. And fermented foods, removing fermented foods just means fermented with vinegar. So don't remove any of the fermented with salt and water only, because that actually will help, because that's good gut bacteria. So you want that. They need to clarify. It's always those little details. But the most time-honored and effective path to getting rid of mold toxins in the body once and for all is Chinese herbs and acupuncture. This is something that I was told a long time ago by a friend of ours who, I think I told the story, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was my second episode where one of our friends, she's a good friend of mine now, she was 5 when she got her first set of vaccines, and she got like the mother load, and then came home and had chronic fatigue, and it turned out she had mercury poisoning and she had a yeast overgrowth. And she said that her favorite thing that she did, the final thing she did, was Chinese medicine. So go for it. Called Gu syndrome. This is what they call it in Chinese medicine. It's a chronic inflammatory condition or superinfection involving many different pathogens, including fungi, viruses, and bacteria. Anyway, so testing. Oh, let me keep going there. The key symptoms to look for are the same: chronic digestive disorders, diarrhea and/or constipation, low energy, fatigue, brain fog, confusion, headaches, and physical as well as emotional pain. Sure got a lot of that. Clients often have anxiety and depression and experience a stuck feeling. Yes, I have been feeling that way, like they're not themselves. As well as mood swings and personality changes. I don't know about maybe, because I have been cranky with my best friend and she's seen like, yeah. I'm sorry to my best friend. So, okay, the testing. So there's lots of different kinds of mold. And then the tests that you get will only, like the cheaper the test, the less mold they test for. So you may test your house with a cheap test that you get at Home Depot for 99 bucks. And you just scratch the surface, my friend. So toxic molds to watch out for. Oh my God, this is way too much to read to you. Yeah, there's a lot of, okay, let me just read to you the names of them. So the ones to watch out for that they talk about: Aspergillus flavus, Aspergillus fumigatus, Aspergillus ochraceus, Aspergillus niger, Aspergillus versicolor, Chaetomium globosum. That's a funny name. Cladosporium spores, Fusarium sp, Penicillium verrucosum, Stachybotrys chartarum, which is basically black mold. You probably heard that before. Wallemia, which is what we had, Sebi, and that can cause kidney damage. I mean, it's serious, y'all. Okay, so got mold. Where to look if mold is suspected? Basements, attic insulation, bathrooms, ventilation, HVAC ducting, air conditioning and swamp cooling systems, humidifier pans behind wallpaper, within and below carpeting, and around ceiling tiles. So, and now testing. So, you can do like the self-awareness and mold sabbatical, like basically, do you feel better when you leave the house? Do you get sick when you go to work or school or the gym? Pay attention to your symptoms and where you experience them. These places could be making you ill. Get out of the mold for at least a week and see how you're doing, like wherever you suspect there might be mold. But if it's your house, take as little from your home environment as possible when you leave. So one of the things when we talked to Dr. Osborne about it, because I had heard one woman, like she burned all her clothes. I'm like, I don't have that much money to like go burn and everything. She basically burned everything soft. And so I asked Dr. Osborne if that was necessary. He's like, if you're washing it in hot water with detergent, you're all right. He's like, if there's any visible mold on anything, you're not going to be able to clean that out. So just go ahead and throw it away. So I did have some pairs of shoes that I had to throw away, but for the most part, I kept everything because I'm like, I don't know. I might get rid of some other things. We'll see. But I washed a whole lot of stuff too. So here you go. So there's a few tests that they're mentioning. HERTSMI, HERTSMI2. This is a mold test for the 5 most dangerous molds, costing around $150. The ERMI test, which is the one we did, it's called the Environmental Relative Moldiness Index, was developed by the U.S. the EPA, to assess the overall mold burden in a space by quantifying 36 molds and comparing their levels against a reference database. Runs about $200 to $350, yes. There's a lot of companies online that you can order those from. The thing is, you won't know how to read them. So you won't really know what you're doing. So you may want to get a functional medicine doctor anyway. But if you can't afford one, just order it online. And then you'll see the numbers and you'll see the range. And you just have to like figure it out. Anyway. Petri dish test. So this is the stuff you can get for $10 or $80. They attract many different molds, so test results are difficult to interpret. Many toxic molds, including Stachybotrys, don't readily show up in these tests. Worth it? Not really. If you think you have a problem, get serious. Air tests. These detect the presence of spores from different species of mold in the air. usually conducted by indoor air quality professionals. The disadvantages: these tests miss mold fragments and other genetic material indicating the presence of mold. They also tend to miss Stachybotrys, which releases a heavy spore that quickly falls to the floor, and they're expensive, costing $1,000 and up. Personal testing. Testing for mold mycotoxins in you. So basically, it's a urine sample. Sometimes nasal and sputum tests are done. Rarely a tissue biopsy may be required. Oh boy. So these are the tests. Let's see. The personal testing that are recommended by Dr. Richie Shoemaker. Vasoactive intestinal polypeptide, called VIP for short. Melanocyte stimulating hormone, called MSH. Transforming growth factor beta 1, otherwise known as TGF beta 1. Just thank God it's Friday, beta 1. C4A. Other tests are Great Plains Laboratory does mycotoxin tests, chronic inflammation response system, visual contrast test. It's a free online test of contrast sensitivity. So that is something that I noticed with me. I'm having a difficult time with contrast. And I think Holden is too, because he's having issues with his eyes. I thought it was twitching. But now that I'm looking at this a little more closely, I'm like, okay, maybe he's having the same trouble I am, because I'm at the computer all day, so I'm expecting to have my eyes have issues. But this is like, I can see normally other things, but with like, I got some blue light glasses, but there's something wrong, right? And it just seems like I can't focus, and it's not anything I can put my finger on. But when I heard this contrast thing, so this is what's leading me to the next thing I'm going to tell you about that I've never talked about before. And thankfully, I was roasting marshmallows that we made. We made marshmallows. They were delicious. Holden, autism approved and diet approved and everything. It was actually keto. With a neighbor whose kid has autism too, and she said he has dyslexia, and they just figured it out. They kept missing it. And I remembered Holden's first psychiatrist. Her name was Dr. Zucconi in Houston. She had these colored glasses on, and I asked her about them. I complimented her, and she's like, oh, these are my Irlen lenses. And she's a practitioner of Irlen. It's IRLEN. And what it is basically is colored lenses. And they put like different layers of lenses basically in your glasses. So if you want to think about it, what we're talking about with visual contrast is like, think about 3D glasses. Like if any of you have ever gone to the movies or watched a show that was in 3D, you got a pair of paper glasses that had one lens blue and one lens red. And when you put them on, your eyes basically kind of superimposed those two colors on the image. Or vice versa, the image had to come through and reflect through that and get to the back of your head and your occipital nerve and all that cool stuff. Anyway, so it's kind of like that, where you've got different colors like turquoise and purple. They have like a lot of different shades. It's not like you would have two different colored lenses. It's basically you have one shade, but there's kind of layers of color there depending on you and what works for you. So she's a practitioner of Irlen. So I'm thinking of going with Holden to get that done, because his eyes have been dry. He's complaining about it, freaking out because he can't, focus on what's on the computer, and I feel the same. But I got the blue light blockers, and I think that may just be all I need. I'm sure with the mold, it'll start to go away, but because I don't have that HLA-DQ gene, I think just because I saw how Holden and his dad were affected, I think it's common that's where the HLA-DQ genes are coming from. And I'm not as badly affected as Holden is. So I think he could really use the Irlen. It might take him a little longer to recover. And I'm just getting the blue. Anyway, so Irlen, that's cool. And it's used a lot with dyslexia. So Okay, so I got a few notes here, so I'm gonna make sure I talk to you about everything I want to talk to you about. Oh, okay. Next thing, he slept on his own. So I got a cat right before COVID happened, like literally the Friday before all of this stuff went down. We were on lockdown. And I got the cat because he slept before when I was with my husband with his dog in his room. So he slept before on his own as long as the dog was in his room. So I'm like, well, I don't have enough time to take care of a dog, but I'll get a cat and see what happens. So the first night, this cat was wonderful. And she slept, kind of went under his bed. And since she was under the bed, she was technically there in his room with him. So he went to bed with her. But then he gets up and goes to my room in the middle of the night because he gets scared. And then the cat goes to my room in the middle of the night. And that was the only night that he slept on his own. So fast forward to months later where the cat was, unbeknownst to me, pregnant. They told me she had been fixed. Don't believe them when they tell you that. So she was 3 weeks pregnant when I got her. And she just immediately started pinking like 3 days afterwards. Maybe 2. So she had some kittens, and the kitten he wanted to take to his dad's house is the one that also comes back to stay with me when he's with me. So this time, the kitten's used to sleeping with him. The other 2, I kept Mama and her little girl. They're used to me and they come and sleep with me. So he finally did it. And not only did he do it, but he chose to do it. He was like, I'm going to sleep on my own with my cat. I'm like, dude, whatever, sounds good, which is great because he's almost 13. And I'm like, this is going to be weird. I don't want to be who you see when you wake up one morning with some new experiences, So yay, we are on the path. So speaking of that, when I got the cat, the jerky landlords that I had told me that we could just have the cat without paying any deposit or anything because I told them why I was getting it. And American Disabilities Association says that if you need a support animal, this is good to know. You can't be charged a deposit for pets or any extra fees having to do with pets. You can just have them with no deposit. Same thing with flying with your animal. You're not charged anything. So, but you have to, so they probably knew that and they went ahead and let me do it. And then when I moved out, dude, I had to go to the hospital because the mold illness was so bad that I had a cavitation. There's another thing. Okay, so the mainstream medicine doesn't ever tell you anything about dentistry anyway. It doesn't know much about this, but biological dentistry does. When you get your wisdom teeth removed, like I did like 23 years ago, if they don't clean it all up and take out membranes and certain things, it's left in there and becomes necrotic. The same things happen if you get your tubes tied. Your ovaries can basically die because it's not getting enough blood supply or any blood supply once they cut and tie them. So you can go into menopause early and all kinds of stuff. So with this, I had those fevers for years and I would go get my SpectraCell and it would go down. Everything would be fine. I'd shore up all those the nutrient losses I had, but I didn't have the money like I did with Holden to do some root cause analysis. Well, turns out this has been my source of infection for the last 20-something years. And finally, with the mold, my biological dentist said, your immune system must have just caved and it probably went crazy. So what happened was I got Ludwig's angina, which is basically I turned into Jabba the Hutt and my airways were closing all the way up to my nose, like my left nostril and my throat. Like I was swallowing my epiglottis and barely able to breathe. This was all I had. So I was freaking out because I'm like, everybody's freaking out about COVID not breathing. I'm like, I cannot have all my airways closed. What is going to happen? Am I going to breathe out of my ears? Anyway, so I went to the hospital for that. And that was in the middle of my move. So I couldn't finish moving any of my literally you can die. I went to the emergency room anyway, and they had to yank a tooth out and still, I don't think that wasn't the issue. My tooth was fine. My dentist had missed it the week before when I came complaining about pain because my teeth were fine. So they had to pull a perfectly good tooth, and that still wasn't the problem because mainstream medicine doesn't know about these things. It's super annoying. And then when I asked 3 oral surgeons and another dentist, and they looked at me like I had 3 heads. Like, what is that? It's cavitation surgery. Anyway, it can cause all kinds of problems. That's probably what's causing me problems with my veins right now. But anyway, I've got other health issues I'm going to try and deal with now that I've got this out of the way. But support animals. If you get a letter from your doctor, it seems hard to do. I can't seem to get one from anybody. But there are some sample letters online if you want to look online and like write one for your doctor to sign. And they're pretty simple. If your doctor won't do it for you, like it can be any physician, then there are some places online, like there's US Help Animals, or I can't remember what it's called. But there's a few places online where you can go and basically say, I need a support animal, and they will have a doctor call you and do some sort of telemedicine. And it's like $95 for a cat. I don't know how much it is for the other animals. If you have a sport elephant, maybe it's more. It sucks that like you have special needs. So it should be carte blanche to whatever special thing you need. You should not have to pay extra. You're already paying out the butt for all this stuff that you have to pay for. So anyway, I don't know why we have to pay and pay and pay and pay and pay, dear Lord. But now my landlords are charging me after the fact for my cats. So now I have to get the letter for sure and tell them, hey, you can't do that. That's against the Americans with Disabilities Act. You'd think people would be kind, because I didn't clean. I couldn't clean. By the time I was done, I was like, I had just had surgery, basically, and then was up for and had, Jabba the Hutt face, and was on 4 rounds of antibiotics, and I had to start work again and take care of Holden over the holidays, and try to move into it. And thankfully I got a few people to help me from my congregation, and my best friend and my daughter offered to help. But yeah, support animals. If y'all know a way to get it for free, let me know. But anyway, aside from your doctor, I don't know any other way. So that's it. I think that's all the stuff. Oh no, there's one more thing. Really, 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 really great. Holden got 100 on his science test. Now, mind you, this was the boy that was graded retarded level when he was 3.5. He was put in special ed. Now he's in normal classes. He got 100 on his science test. And this semester, or the 6 weeks, he got all A's and B's. All A's and B's. Even in English, which is like his most difficult subject. So, I don't know if in online classes it's better for him. He doesn't like it because he's very social. So he wants to go back to school. Or maybe he's not as exposed to mold. Maybe some of it's in school. So anyway, I hadn't thought about that. Love you, and I hope you guys have a wonderful, well, I guess 2021 now. And I hope to have more updates for you. Hopefully more and more good stuff. Please share this with anyone you think might be able to use it. Please subscribe and do me a big favor and like it, because it'll get more views and maybe somebody will get some help out of this. Anyway, hope y'all have the best year ever.